Hi, this is Vernon, and this is part 17 of Chasing Time Travelers. Um, there are only two slides for this. I'm going to talk about the Maryland 400 for a bit, and there wasn't enough time to put them into into part 16. So here's the deal with the Maryland 400. Um, I was reading one of the Mayan creation myths, and they talked about the 400 drunken young boys, the 400 drunken young men. That's something like that, boys, young men, and um, and it says that they were coming from. Let's see, how does this go? Well, put it this way: they were near a bay, and Zipacna was at the shore of that bay eating clams or something. As soon as it said Zipacna, that's how I know, okay, we're talking about the American Revolutionary War. Zipacna is Lord Cornwallis, right? That's the name that in my theory, the time travelers gave to Lord Cornwallis. And Vucub his dad, that's King George III. So I'm reading this myth and I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. So there's 400 guys. This is the Mayan myth now I'm talking about. There's 400 guys who cut down a tree, um, and they cut the branches off, presumably, and they want to use it as a central pillar for a big house that they want to live in, and but they can't carry the tree because it's too heavy. So then Zipacna comes along and he says, "I'll carry the tree, you chumps, get out of the way," right? So Zipacna, hefts it onto his shoulder or something and walks off with the tree. This is the Mayan creation myth, right? About the 400 drunken young men, and the 400 drunken young men are like, "This is awful. He's going to make us look like idiots and like weaklings, so we're going to have to kill him." And then nobody will find out that he carried a pillar that 400 of us couldn't carry. So then so the 400 drunken young men devise a plan where so they say, okay, thanks, buddy, for carrying this pillar for us. And they say, okay, we're going to dig a hole now. So Zapata, you dig the hole, and they conspired amongst themselves. They said, okay, now he's going to dig that hole for the pillar. It's going to be upright, and once he goes down in there deep enough, we're going to take the pillar that they somehow couldn't lift before, but now they can lift it, right? We're going to take the pillar and we're going to slam it down into the hole where he is, and he's not going to have enough room to escape because the hole has to be snug for the pillar, and we're going to smash him to bits, and that's how we'll kill him. So they all said, yeah, this is what we're going to do. So Zapakna's no idiot. He can figure out that something's not right. So when he's down in the hole, he digs a sideways tunnel, right, so that when they slam the pillar down, he can get out of there. And so they said, okay, Zapakna, just a second or whatever, right? And so then they slammed the pillar down, thinking they crushed him, and he wanted them to think that they crushed him. So he bit off pieces of his fingernails, and he had the ants carry them to the surface, and his hair too. He had the ants carry pieces of his hair and his fingernails, which were presumably, a little bloody from biting them, and so that the guys on the surface would be like, oh, so the Maryland 400, I'm sorry, so that the Mayan, the 400 drunken young men would say, oh, okay, he's dead now. And so the plan worked, and Zapakna fooled them into thinking that he was dead. And I guess they got drunk at that point. I don't remember where the alcohol came in, if ever really. But in any case, so they're all like asleep or something, and Zapakna climbs out of the tunnel and goes over to the big house that they've constructed now, and he picks up the house and he slams it down on the 400 drunken young men and he kills them. And then he goes on about his business. So when I read that story, I'm like, no, 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 it's not what they're saying. It's because obviously these things are impossible, right? Nobody can pick up a house that can that can house 400 people, right? Um, they just tell the time traveler Mayan guys. They tell stories in a funny kind of way. So I Googled Revolutionary War because once they said it was Zipacna, then I knew they were talking about Lord Cornwallis, and which I think I explained in the previous thing how I concluded that Zipacna was Cornwallis and so on. But anyway, um, I'll try to speed this up. So what they're really talking about is the Maryland 400. I just simply Googled Mayan 400 boys or something and American Revolution. That's what I did. I did like 400 and then American Revolution, and then it told me about the Maryland 400. I'm like, here it is. It's a very similar story but told in a different way. So what happened with the real Maryland 400 is that George Washington and his men had gone from Manhattan, which was known as among the Algonquins as the island of drunkenness, but I'm not sure why. And that might be where the term 400 drunken young men comes from. But so they went across New York Harbor to Gravesend Bay, where I kind of grew up until I was 7. But in any case, that's not the point. So they go to Gravesend Bay, and uh, let's see. So Lord Cornwallis is chasing the Americans, and he's going to catch them. And I always get choked up when I tell this story, but I'll tell it anyway. So he's going to catch them, and the war's about to be over. And this is the Battle of Brooklyn, also known as the Battle of Long Island. And I'm not a historian, right? But so so George Washington says we need some guys to stay behind. This is basically a suicide mission. We need some guys to stay behind and be the rear guard and attack the British while the rest of the army escapes. And so the Maryland guys said yes, we'll do it. So it's 400 guys, and so they so the Maryland 400 fight the British, and they're outnumbered like 3 to 1 or 4 to 1, something like that. They're vastly outnumbered by the British, and but I think it was they attacked the British like 3 times or something, and so George Washington and the rest of the men, you know, escaped. And word has it that Washington was on a hill, and the British were on another hill, the Lord Cornwallis, and they watched those guys fighting the Maryland 400, and both sides acknowledged how valiant they were. So so the Maryland 400 were killed. So here's the connection now, right? Um, the fingernails with blood, fingernails are white, blood is red, hair for them is black. That's the color. That's the color that the ants. Those are the colors that the ants were carrying when they talk. And they said the ants assembled themselves in the myth. They're talking about the British soldiers. They just told it in a weird kind of way. And when they talk about a pillar, that's the pillar in Prospect Park now that was dedicated to the Maryland 400. And the house that they're talking about building, that's the house. It's still there, right? It's called, in quotes, the old stone house. It's still there in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. That's where the Battle of Brooklyn was, or Long Island was fought. And let's see, once a year they have a memorial for the Maryland 400. And so, oh yeah, also, so at the end of it all, right, of the story that I just told you earlier, Zipacna slams the house down and kills them, right? Well, guess what? The bodies of the Maryland 400 were never properly buried. They are still there beneath the houses in Park Slope, Brooklyn. Um, every now and then, so supposedly in the past, some contractor building a house would find bits and pieces of an American Revolutionary War uniform because, right, the bodies are still down there, and that's what the myth means about Zipacna slamming the house down on them. Okay, thank you for listening to part 17. And then there's the story of the Maryland 400, which is actually in mythology the Mayan 400, And it's so long story, and it involves this pillar, and there's the pillar, but it's in Park Slope, Brooklyn. That would take a while to explain about the Maryland 400.